Module 3, Lesson 8, Ordering Integers and Other Rational Numbers. So continuing on with what we started in the last lesson. So we are going to write, interpret, and explain statements of order for rational numbers in the real world. And we are going to demonstrate and explain that if a is less than b, then negative a is greater than negative b, straight out of lesson 7. Because a number and its opposite are equal distances from 0, and moving along the horizontal number line to the right means the numbers are increasing, becoming greater. Alright, so here we've got a set of rational numbers, and you need to pause and put the numbers in order and be prepared to justify your thinking. Why did you put them in that particular order? So go ahead and pause and put these in order. Alright, well hopefully you have them in this order. Negative 5, negative 4 1/10, negative 4, negative 3 3/5, negative 1, negative 6/10, negative 1/2, 0, 1/4, 1, 2, 2 1/10, 4 5/10, 23/5, and 6. Now if I were, well, here's my thinking. First thing I did is I said all of the negative numbers need to go to the left of the 0. So I looked at all of those and said, okay, you all go left of 0, and then I asked which one of those is going to be farthest from 0. And I said, okay, that's going to be the negative 5 because it's 5 steps from 0, and the rest of these are all less than 5 steps or 5 units from 0. The next thing I looked at and said, okay, which one of these is going to be closest to the 0? And it was kind of a toss-up. I had this half here and this 6/10 here. And I said, okay, well, I know that half is equal to 5/10 because we worked on that in module 2. So this is only 5/10 of the way from 0, but this is 6/10 of the way from 0. So I said that the half, the negative half, would be closest, and the negative 6/10 would come next. So I've taken care of all of these. And then I looked and said, well, if I look at how far they are from the 0, this negative 4 is going to be farther. Oh, I erased my negative 4 there when I shouldn't have. I'll come back to him in a second here. So I've got this negative 4 1/10 and this negative 4. Well, this is 4 units from 0, but this is 4 and a little bit more. So I said this one was farther, so it would come after the negative 5. So I've got 4 1/10. And then I've got the 4. And then I've got this negative 3 3/5 as kind of in between all of that. So that's how I did the negative side, getting them in order from least to greatest. Then I put in my 0, because I just really felt like I needed to have a 0 there, and on top of that, 0 was on the list. So then I had to look and say, what am I going to do with these positive numbers? Well, when I looked at it, I said, okay, this is 1/4 here. This is more than, this is 1 or more, 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 and 1 or more. So I knew that the 1 came next. Well, sorry, the 1/4 came next, and then I knew that the 1 came. Because everything else that I had out here, all of these were greater than 1. And then I had the 2 and the 2 1/10. And this is only 2 units from 0. And this is 2 and a little bit more from 0. That left me with these 3 to look at. And I knew that the 6 was going to be greater than the 4 5/10. But I didn't know where this 23/5 was going to fit. So in my head I had to do a little bit of quick math here. 23/5. And I needed to turn this into a fraction that I could work with. And I found out that was 4 3/5. I know that 4 3/5 is a little bit more than half. So I put the 4 5/10, then the 23/5, and then the 6. All right. So looking at exercise 1. So on a slip of paper, write a non-integer rational number and at least 2 of the numbers must be negative. Now this is an in-class activity where everyone gets a blank card and they write non-integers, so they can't be whole numbers. You can't do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or -1, -2, -3, -4. It has to have a fraction or a decimal to it. At least 2 of the numbers must be negative. And then we exchange them around in the class, and everybody works on arranging their numbers from least to greatest, from greatest to least, whatever I assign you to do. So let's pretend that I gave you these 4 numbers on a card, and you can just kind of try this out at home. So I've got 3/5, I've got -1 3/4, I've got 7/10, and I've got -1 7/10. So go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and put these in order from least to greatest. All right, well, I know the 2 negative numbers are going to be less than the 2 positive numbers. I know that 3/4 is 7/500, so I have a -1 7/500, and I'm comparing that to a -1 7/10. And as I look at these, I see that they're both going to go 7/10 from 0, but this one is then going to go a little bit farther. So I'm going to say -1 7/500 is least, followed by -1 7/10. Now that leaves me with my other 2 numbers, 3/5 and 7/10. And the question is, which one is less and which one is greater? Well, the 3/5 here would be really easy to scale up to make tenths. Just multiply by this fraction equal to 1, and I will have 6, 3 times 2. I'll have 6/10, which looks like that. So the 7/10 is farther away from 0 to the right, and the 6/10 goes in the middle. So hopefully my thinking matches or kind of goes along with your thinking. All right, least to greatest. All right, here we go. Looking at an example. Sam has $10 in the bank. He owes his friend Hank $2.25. He owes his sister $1.75. We're supposed to consider or think about the 3 rational numbers related to this story of Sam's money. And we are going to write them in order from least to greatest. So the first thing we need to do is we need to write these as positive and negative numbers. Well, $10 in the bank is a plus for Sam. So I'm going to say that that is a positive $10. Now, owing his friend Hank $2.25, that's a minus $2.25. And owing his sister money is going to be a minus $1.75. So now we're going to put these in order from least to greatest, and we need to think about where kind of they would go on the number line. Well, I know that this positive 10 out here is going to be greater than the two negative numbers, because a positive number is always greater than a negative number. So now I need to look at these negative numbers and do some thinking about where they're going to go on the number line. Now on this first one, I'm going 2 units from 0. So 1, 2, so there's the negative 2. And on top of that, I'm going a little bit farther. So there's negative 2 and 25 hundredths. So there's the negative 2, and I went a little bit more. Now on this other one, I'm going negative 1, and I'm going a little bit farther, 75 hundredths. So looking at my number line here, I can put them in order from least to greatest of negative 2 and 25 hundredths, negative 1 and 75 hundredths, and then I have my positive 10. They are in order from least to greatest because our least is on the left to our greatest on the right. All right, looking at exercise 2. We are going to list the rational numbers that relate to each situation. Then we are going to order them from least to greatest, and we're going to explain how we got them in that order. So during the most recent visit to the optometrist, who is an eye doctor, Kadisha and her sister Beth had their vision tested. Kadisha's vision in her left eye was a negative 1 5/10. And her vision in her right eye was the opposite number. So good thing we practiced opposites, and I know that the opposite is going to be 1 5/10. Beth's vision was negative 1 and positive 25 hundredths. I'm busy skipping forward here. All right, 25 hundredths. And I am supposed to put these in order from least to greatest, and I need to have some explanation for how I made my decisions. Well, I know that the positive numbers are going to go to the right of 0. So I know that I'm going to have the 1 5/10 and the 25 hundredths. And the negative numbers are going to go to the left of the 0. So I've got the negative 1 and 50 hundredths and the negative 1. So looking at the positive side, I can see that this first number, this 1 5/10, it's going to go 1, and it's going to go halfway more to be 1 5/10. Okay. The second number, this 25 hundredths, doesn't even get to the 1. It's somewhere in between 0 and 1, and it's not even halfway. So I've got the 25 hundredths. So I know that I'm going to have 25 hundredths, and I know that's going to be followed by the 1 5/10. So that takes care of the positive number side. Now looking at the negative number side, if I look at this first one, I know that I'm going to go to negative 1, and then I'm going to keep going. I'm going to go a little bit farther to the 1 5/10. Now on the second one, I'm just going to negative 1. And I know the farther left I go, the less the number is. So I've got 1 5/10, followed by negative 1, followed by 25 hundredths, followed by 1 5/10. And hopefully you can hear my thinking here. I'm really trying hard to say out loud this is what's going on in my head. All right, looking at exercise 3. So we are going to again list them from least to greatest, and we're going to explain how we made our decision. There are 3 pieces of mail in Ms. Thomas's mailbox: a bill from the phone company for $38.12, a bill from the electric company for $67.55, and a tax refund for $25.89. Okay. Now, bills are things I have to pay. Those are negatives to me. Money I have to spend. Now, a tax refund is money that I get back. So that's a positive for me. So a bill is money you owe, and tax refund is money you receive. So I've got 2 negatives and a positive. Now, if I'm thinking about this, I know that the positive number is going to be greater than the 2 negative numbers. So I'm going to write it at the end. Now, as I look at the numbers, I need to ask myself, which one of these is going to be farther away from 0? Well, They're both on the negative side, but this second one here, this 67 and 55 hundredths, that's almost twice as far from 0 as this 3812. So going left, that 6755 is going to be the farthest to the left, so it's the least. And that leaves me with the 3812 in between. Looking at exercise 4, same instructions. Monica, Jack, and Destiny measured their arm lengths for an experiment in science class. They compared their arm lengths to a standard length of 22 inches. Ooh. So these numbers that we're going to look at are compared to 22. The listing below shows in inches how each student's arm length compares to 22 inches. So in this example, 22 inches is actually our 0. So the standard arm length now Monica is an eighth less. So if this is our 0, she's going an eighth less than that. Now Jack is going longer than that. He's a plus 1 3/4. So if we're putting these in orders from least to greatest, we can see that Jack has the longest arm because he's a positive 1 3/4. Now Destiny, which is farther from 0, this negative half or this negative eighth? Well, this is only 1/8 of a little teeny tiny step from 0. This is half a step. So the half is going to be farther from 0, so it is the least. So we have negative half, negative eighth, and 1 3/4. So Jason is entering college and has opened a checking account, which he will use for college expenses. His parents gave him $200 to deposit into the account. Jason wrote a check for $85 to pay for his calculus book and a check for $25.34 to pay for miscellaneous school supplies. We're going to write the 3 rational numbers related to the balance in Jason's checking account in order from greatest to least. How many of you noticed it just switched? We're going greatest to least now. All right, well, putting money in is a positive 200. Writing a check to pay for your calculus book is a negative $85. And then writing another check for miscellaneous, $25.34, is also taking money out of the checking account. So if I'm writing from greatest to least, I know that a positive number is always going to be greater than a negative number. So the 200 is our greatest number because it's the only positive number we have. Now looking at these other two, I have to ask myself, which of these is farthest from 0? Real quickly, I can sketch a number line here. Here's my 0, and if I were counting in the negatives, I'd get to negative 25, and then I'd have to keep going a really long time to get to negative 85. So 200 is clear out here on the far right-hand side. Negative 25 is in the middle, and negative 85 is way, way down there on the left-hand side. So they are in order from greatest to least. All right, looking at exercise 5, we are now going to do the same thing we've been doing, but we're doing in greatest to least order. So we have monthly bills that Mr. McGraw must pay. He's got to pay $122 for cable and internet. He's got to pay $73.45 for gas and electric, and he's got to pay $45 for the cell phone. Now these are all going to be minuses for him. These are all taking money away from him. So I'm going to represent them as the negative numbers that they are, taking money away. So now I need to put them in order from greatest to least. Well, these are all 3 negative numbers. So I know that I'm working over here on this left side of 0. And the question is, which one of these is closest to 0 and which one is the farthest away? Well, this one has 3 digits, none of them decimals. These have more than 3 digits, but they've got these decimals. This has 2 digits before the decimal. This has 2 digits before the decimal. This has 3 digits before the decimal. I know that that negative 122 is a long ways from 0. Way more than these other two. Now this one, this negative 45, is only 45 units from 0. The negative 73, well, it's 73 units from 0. So if I'm listing them in order from greatest to least, I've got 45, I've got, well, it's negative 45, and I've got 73, 45, and that's a negative 7345, and I've got negative 122. So they're now in order from greatest to least. Now remember that we're not actually talking about the amount of the bills, we're just talking about the rational numbers that go with the bills. A logical person is going to say paying $122 is way more than paying $45, and that's true. But remember, we're representing these situations with rational numbers, and then we're just practicing ordering them. All right, looking at exercise 6, we are going to list the rational numbers that relate to each situation from greatest to least. So we need to go greatest to least again, and this has no story with it. We just have rational numbers that are positive and negative. And I love this one. I've got a 0 there, so I'm just going to put a 0 on the number line because everything on the number line can be measured from 0. And I've got a positive number here, and I know that positive numbers go to the right, and there's only one positive number. So that's the only thing that's going on the right-hand side of the 0. Now that leaves me with thirds and fifths, one of each. Now if I were to stop and think about this, these are fractions that have no whole number in front of them. So I could put a 1 on here, and I know that these fractions are somewhere in between the 0 and the negative 1. Now, this first fraction is counting in thirds. So 3 equal-sized pieces, and I'm at negative 1/3. Now this other fraction is counting in fifths. 1, 2, 3, 4, and I wish that I was better drawing. But hopefully you can see that the pieces of this negative 1/5 are going to be much smaller. So only one of them is going to be closer to 0 than one of the thirds. So if I'm putting them in order from greatest to least, I've got 1/8 as my greatest, and then I've got 0, and then I've got my negative 1/5, and then I've got my negative 1/3. All right, so if we had 3 numbers, and they are in order from least to greatest, and the order is ABC, what would the order be if the same 3 numbers were in order from greatest to least? So they start out as least to greatest, and I want to know what the order would be from least to greatest. So if this is greatest to least, A, B, and C, least would, least to greatest, so A is my least, C is my greatest. If I flip them, C will now be the greatest, because it's greatest over here. B is still in the middle, and A is coming in as the least. So how many of you noticed with 3 numbers that they have swapped their spots to go from least to greatest to greatest to least? The middle number stayed the same. The 2 end numbers swapped locations. So we had C, B, and A, and this is the correct order because it has to be exactly the opposite order, since we're now moving from right to left on the number line when originally we moved left to right. So we were going least to greatest, but all of a sudden we were going to greatest to least, so we're going the other direction, so we have to change the order to make it exactly the opposite, which means that that lucky B in the middle, well, it didn't have to do anything. So how does graphing numbers on a number line help us determine the order when arranging the numbers from greatest to least or least to greatest? Well, hopefully you're thinking to yourself that using a number line helps us because we can see where the numbers go on the number line compared to each other. Instead of having to think of this abstractly with nothing to look at, putting them on the number line helps us see what is actually happening. So when we order rational numbers, their opposites are in the opposite order. So if I order 5 and 7, and I want to order their opposites, which would be -5 and -7, then the order is the opposite. So this is least to greatest, and this is also least to greatest. So I ordered two numbers, and then their opposites are going to be in the opposite order, and both of these are least to greatest. All right, taking a quick look at the I can statements. I can write, interpret, and explain statements of order for rational numbers in the real world. We did lots of those real world examples, remembering that we pulled the numbers out and just worked with the numbers. I can demonstrate and explain that if A is less than B, then negative A is greater than negative B because a number and its opposite are equal distances from 0. And moving along the horizontal number line to the right means the numbers are increasing. So that concludes Module 3, Lesson 8. Make sure that you complete your problem set. Make sure you complete your exit ticket. If you need help, be certain to reach out to your teacher.